The Boarding House is a suspense story which ends with the strategic techniques of Mrs. Mooney, who has been presented as the central character of this story. He plays the significant role to settle the love affair of her young daughter and Mr. Doran, with whom her young daughter Polly had an affair and special relationship. Mrs. Mooney is the daughter of a rich butcher. She fell in love with a man who works for her father, and then she marries the man. After the death of her father, her husband starts drinking and taking money from the shop. It shows that she has been running a butcher shop. Her husband fights with her in front of the customers. It shows that her husband is not a gentleman. Within the short period of time, her husband finishes almost all the property and money. One night, her husband runs after her with a knife in order to kill her, but she saves her life by spending that night in the neighboring house. After that, they can't live together. Mrs. Mooney takes her children and the remaining money of the shop, and she starts a boarding house. Tourists, musicians, and the visitors from the city come to stay in her boarding house. Young men live and eat in the boarding house. They talk about horse riding. They sing songs on Saturday nights. The daughter of Mrs. Mooney, Polly, sings with them. Polly is a beautiful girl of 19 years with soft hair and grey eyes. The intention of Mrs. Mooney is to trap a young man for her daughter. So she gives houseworks to Polly to do. In such a way, Polly comes in contact with the young men who live and eat in the boarding house. Mrs. Mooney notices something special between Polly and Mr. Doran. Mr. Doran is a young man of mid-30s. He works in a merchant shop. He frequently comes to the boarding house and he stays there. There is strong attachment between Polly and Mr. Doran. Mooney is aware of their affair, but she does not interfere the love affair between Polly and Mr. Doran because she thinks that Mr. Doran is the right young man for Polly. So she does not interfere the relation between Mr. Doran and Polly. But Mr. Doran changes his attitude and he decided not to marry Polly. Mr. Doran thinks that his family will not accept Polly and his friends will laugh at him. He thinks about the people talking badly about the drunkard father of Polly and bad reputation of the boarding house. Polly feels uncomfortable. She is very sad. When Mrs. Mooney knows the intention of Mr. Doran, she becomes quite bold. Mr. Doran tries to be free from Polly by giving her a lot of money, but Mrs. Mooney does not want to sell the virtue of her daughter in money. Mrs. Mooney uses strong reason and persuasive strategies to convince Mr. Doran. She reminds Mr. Doran of his happy moment with Polly. At last, Mrs. Mooney is able to convince Mr. Doran, and she compels Mr. Doran to marry her daughter Polly. In such a way, James Joyce has presented a story of a family. The central character or protagonist is Mrs. Mooney. Mrs. Mooney is a bold and determined woman. Despite being a female, she has possessed a lot of male virtues. She is able to settle every problem seen in her everyday life. She leaves her husband because her husband is bad and her husband is a drunkard. When her husband tries to kill her with a knife, she takes her children and remaining amount of money and she starts a boarding house. In this sense, Mrs. Mooney is able to run her family. She is the mother of a son and a daughter. Mr. Doran is going to be free from Polly. He tries to give a lot of money to Mrs. Mooney and Polly, but she takes strong decision and persuasive technique or strategies to convince Mr. Doran for her daughter Polly. So we can say that Mrs. Mooney is a strong and bold woman having a lot of male virtues, because after leaving her husband, she is able to run her family smoothly, properly, or in appropriate way, and she saves the love affairs of her daughter, and she compels Mr. Doran to accept Polly.